So you're saying that Robert was hopped up on substances and he lost control. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but
And we are live.
Oh, no. All right. So just to recap, Robert was out of control.
Oh, jeez.
Hopped up on substances at a show in Reading, Pennsylvania. Are you aware of any police reports? Were the authorities involved at all?
I don't recall, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that was the show where he got the nickname the Reading Raiders. So where it had to come from, right?
That might be it. That might be it.
I haven't gone back since, if that is any indication of how that went.
I believe there are warrants out. I'm not sure. I can call my mom and check. She can look into that. But
I think the best part of that time is you'd be like, I can call my mom and find out, Robert.
Well, Andy, welcome to the show. This is G.I. Joe Debriefed. Does anybody who wants to take the kind of overview, since Brandon's not here? Usually our wordsmith does it.
I should have been more prepared.
That's all right.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to watch the episode. Go for it.
I researched Andy. So first I'm going to introduce Andy Schmidt. It's nice to meet you, Andy. I've read a lot of the books that you've had a strong influence on as editor. So I appreciate your work. I thought the G.I. Joe relaunch by IDW back in 8 or 9 was great. I read all of it all the way up through Civil War and enjoyed all of it. Cobra was my favorite series by far. I thought that series was absolutely brilliant. Gage and Costa were on fire.
That was Robert's favorite too, and he was drawing the other one.
Yeah, exactly. I read Snake Eyes just for Robert's pencils. I didn't really enjoy the story. Oh, I said it. But hey, Snake Eyes has never looked better, man. So anyway, Andy Schmidt, he was an editor at Marvel. And Andy, please step in, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. 2008 to 2012, you worked at IDW. You edited all the G.I. Joe books, among other tasks. But this is a G.I. Joe podcast, so I'll lean heavily on that. You then went to work for Hasbro for a few years, which is cool. Got the inside scoop, so we'll waterboard you for information later. And now you run comicsexperience.com, which trains aspiring comic artists, illustrators, writers, editors to hone their craft and hopefully get a job in the field. Did I do all right?
Yeah, you did great. Yeah, I'm also a writer and an entertainment industry consultant, and I run a comics printing business called ONS Printing, which is sort of specifically targeted at small publishers and like indie creators, and trying to lower the price point. So basically, I take bulk pricing that like they would offer to a large publisher, and I buy that up, and then I sell it at that discounted rate to I bring those rates basically down to creators.
What's a typical quantity for a aspiring artist that has a book that's ready to print? What kind of print runs are you talking about?
Well, the printing that I primarily do, I do have a print on demand option now, and print on demand, not to get too deep into the woods here, but like you can do like a shorter print run more easily. So, but typically what I'm doing with this, is offset printing, which is sort of what you think of as like comics traditionally printed. So like Marvel, DC, IDW, all those guys do offset printing. And so for like a regular comic, you probably want to do a print run if you're doing an offset of like 1,000 or more. If you get under 1,000, you're starting to get into that area of like, well, maybe print on demand makes more sense financially or what have you. But I prefer the look and feel of offset print. But yeah, what, Tom?
I was going to say is, say I came to you with a book and it was like, it was something like a short print run, something like Robert Atkins drunkenly beats toddlers. Would you be able to help me bring that to the market? If I'm a creator and I come to you and I say I have this concept.
Right.
Would you be able to work with me to develop the concept and get Robert Atkins drunkenly beats toddlers packaged and to market?
Well, first of all, why would you do a short print run on a book that's clearly going to be so popular? And I would certainly work with you. I would suggest reducing the height and width of it so that we could pack it in with every G.I. Joe figure coming out.
What if we did this at like a treasury size edition so that it's actual toddler size, and then the back is a cutout?
Right. No,
Yeah.
I think
We'll talk
we're
later.
onto something.
I'll
here.
table.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, I'll table this for afterward.
So, Andy, what inspired you to join us on Debrief today?
I think it was that I had no idea what I was in for. Somebody
Yeah.
just said, "Hey, come on." No. Robert had reached out to me, and then I think I had talked with Tom too at some point. I'd been wanting to come on for a couple episodes, but I've got 2 kids, and they, I don't know, they've been crazy, and work's been weird. Like I usually have people that work with me. This is my home office, and usually I have people that work even here with me, but everybody's working from home, so it's all nuts and crazy. And my time is not my own.
It's pretty interesting to meet a comic book creator that is also so incredibly, obviously entrepreneurial, has multiple, plates spinning, and you got a publishing company, you've got an educational website, you got some things cooking. So it's good to see. Did you go to business school or something?
I did not. The first business I started with was Comics Experience, and so I was actually just teaching in person in New York for the first year or two, and then we moved to California when I took the job at IDW. They're based in San Diego, and then I took the classes online at that point, and I just I was very passionate about teaching. I was very passionate about comics, so that was like a logical sort of like, oh, I'll take these 2 things that I love and I'll mash them together. That made a lot of sense, and then it turned out that people dug it. I kept signing up for courses, so I kept going. And then I just realized that I really liked creating the new stuff, whether it was a new course or it was a new aspect of that business. And then eventually it just sort of developed from there. Honestly, the printing thing, which I only started about a year ago, the printing thing came, I wasn't like looking for something else to start, but I was talking with one of my friends at Source Point Press, which is a great publisher. And they started telling me what they were paying. And I was like, that's ridiculous. That's not cool. And so I started talking to other publishers and independent creators, like running Kickstarters and stuff like that, and finding out what they were paying. I was like, there's gotta be, I know what Marvel and DC and IDW pay. I know what they pay for printing. And I'm like, there's gotta be a way that we can close some of that distance. You can't close the distance all the way because they're printing, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 units of a single title, but you can't close it all the way. But I figured there was a way to get closer to it. And so I just started, I don't know, next thing I know, I'm making deals with printers that probably aren't in their best interest. And then off we go.
But it's really because you can offer them quite a bit of business, right? Like you have that ability to negotiate as a bulk buyer, even though it's a bunch of, smaller runs. So
right. Yeah. So basically, as far as they're concerned, I mean, I'm actually working very closely with them, and like we're fully transparent with each other, and I'll introduce my clients to them directly, and we just, because I work with Trivision directly, but they offer me these discounts that I can actually pass on. So for them, it's one account that does all these books, but of course, all these books are actually, each one is different creators or small press publishers and stuff. So it's been really cool, and people have really reacted very positively to it. And then I think part of it is just that I've been in the industry so long, and I've got a reasonably decent reputation, at least prior to coming onto this show and Tom trashing me here. So there was a level of confidence, I think, with a lot of creators like dealing with me.
I hope we haven't damaged your reputation by having you on the show.
I would never say anything bad about Andy Schmidt. I literally owe my career as it is to Andy Schmidt. Plain and simple.
So we have Andy to blame.
That's true.
Right. You keep saying that's true. I think it's actually your talent, your hard work that is to blame for your never going away. But yeah.
So I think we've sufficiently introduced Andy.
I feel good.
Good. The goal of the show is to have on various creators from around the industry. Obviously, we've got our staple comic producers. So Robert Atkins is an amazing penciler. Tom Feister is an even better penciler. How about that? And you guys just met Andy. I'm Carson from 3D Joes. I've got a little website that you guys can check out, 3djoes.com. All for the love of G.I. Joe. So what we do is go through one episode per week, watch the cartoon, and talk about it in a completely uninformed, and not at all educational manner. So if you're coming here for education to learn about the cartoon, that's not really the goal. We're just here to have some fun, take everybody's minds off of things and just try to unwind and enjoy these cartoons like we used to do 30 plus years ago. So anybody want to add anything before we jump in on the episode this week?
Well, just as a bit of a recap, right? We watched the third episode of the second miniseries with Morgan Lofting, right, last week. So that was The Palace of Doom is what we watched last week. As a very, very short recap, I know I'm great at those, but we started off with
get a beverage, Andy. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, if you have a bathroom break, Andy, now's the time.
Yeah.
I did it the first week, and it went on a bit long. Okay, but at any rate.
I think it's still going on, actually.
No. So the Palace of Doom they're in the middle of the Weather Dominator whole experience, and it's been kind of destroyed and or not destroyed, but segmented and sent around the world. And so they're furiously trying to find all the parts to kind of put that together. We, of course, were introduced to Shipwreck in the episode previous to that, and we get this awesome kind of incognito Cobra Flint, and introduce Shipwreck to the rest of the Joe crew. Roadblock, of course, was making his own way out of the kind of that ravine with all the vines previously, and meets in a passing truck Hondaloo West, which was the blonde-haired lady in the back of the truck.
Hondaloo West. I would like to meet her.
Andy, I thought hard about pitching a Hondaloo West series, but you were gone before I could finish my pitch. I still think there's room for it.
So are we in Sandstorm territory now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where it started out. Yeah, that's where this one started out. And then we kind of get where the Joe forces and Cobras kind of to fight on the island, if you remember. And the Joes kind of get there first, but Firefly is doing his job. I've pointed out before in all the episodes of G.I. Joe, Firefly is the only Cobra character who never fails at his mission. He always accomplishes whatever he was tasked to do, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, so he sets a bomb, and we have a big kind of fight out on the island with like Major Blood and a lot of great Joe characters. And then there's kind of a big jungle fight on the island as well. With the temple. So there's kind of we have this really crazy looking kind of snake, not the snake armor, but this kind of snake robot giant. Yep. Was there a name for that? I forget.
Well,
it's this giant blue and red.
Snake, not armor robot. That's
when that guy tried to make it on Kickstarter, I think he called it Cobra Sentinel before Hasbro served him. This thing, yeah, this actually happened. So anyway, it's lovingly known as the Cobra Sentinel in the community. It's kind of infamous because of this Kickstarter thing.
Yeah. So just right towards the end of the episode, we have them trying to collect the parts of the Weather Dominator. And that's where we kind of get this interesting kind of fight between Spirit and Storm Shadow, which the cartoon pitted them against each other for the longest time. And where, who is it? Freedom, right? Is Spirit's bird catches that ninja star out of the air, and if for some reason it doesn't cut right through his skull.
Right. No.
Just snag it.
There are things you're not yet ready to understand about Freedom, okay?
Yeah.
No, exactly. Well, that's true.
You can't kill Freedom, Robert.
Freedom's more than just a bird.
That's right.
So I think we finished that episode. I'm just trying to push through this. We finished the episode, and I think Gung Ho, they were trying to cross this ravine, this broken up ravine of earth or something like that, and then they kind of start to fall down. What's going to happen next week? I think that's kind of how it wraps up.
That was way shorter than last time you did it. So I
did I miss the cavern opening up that the Joes fall into?
Yeah, so that was the cliff. That was the cliffhanger where at least a couple Joes fell into the giant cavern.
It was Gung Ho and Lady J's no. So
yeah.
Okay, that's where it ended because this is the example I use when I talk about G.I. Joe. But go ahead.
No worries. So tonight is the Revenge of Cobra Part 4, Battle on the Roof of the World. This is the cheap plug for Andy's site. If you guys are interesting, aspiring comic book artists and writers, check it out. And here we go. This never happens. You guys let me know how the audio is.
All right.
I think
So
it's
Andy, yeah. So Andy, each week the guest sings along with the opening of the show. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to break that for you. Traditions were made to be broken, Tom.
Such a streak.
I know, man.
Shame.
So, Andy, do you have besides the movie? Was there a particular opening that stuck out to you more than others, or did they all kind of blend together for you?
Oh, like the 15-minute opening in the
Yes.
animated movie. Besides that one,
Yes.
I mean, hands down, that one's the best, obviously.
yeah. Well, I think the original 5-parter one sticks out just because I've seen that one so many times, and like as a kid, like this just summed up everything about patriotism and being good. This was like all that was right with the world when I was a child. Like I have similar feelings about Transformers, but it's a little bit different. Like there's not that sort of like patriotic aspect to it, right? And there's and like I couldn't aspire to be an Autobot, but like like when I thought G.I. Joe was real, and I kind of still do. So. Like I thought that was real. I'm too fat now, but back in the day. And
There's
this is
gotta
it,
be like a senior league for GI Joe,
Like this is it right here.
Golf.
This is the thing that when people ask me like, what do I love about GI Joe? It's the level of preparedness, and this is the best example. When the Earth opens up for no reason, and your friends fall in, you pull a javelin off your back. That is designed specifically to stick into a wall, fire 3 rockets across the cavern with a net attached just to catch your friend.
Right.
That's how prepared the Joes are. Like there's no way you're going to win, right, against that. And also that level of ridiculousness that she would have that. And of course, totally plausible. Like the whole sandstorm thing in the previous episode in the vines. I totally thought that was real stuff, that happened in the real world.
When you're a kid and you're watching this. Yeah. Well, I mean, and you think about like other stuff when we were kids, like you would think that like quicksand was like every 20 feet out in the world because quicksand was like a recurring theme in like every show you were watching. There was at some point somebody got stuck in quicksand. So yeah, when
nothing,
you're a kid,
nothing killed me in Pitfall more than quicksand.
Yeah. There you go. Or snakes. So, did you grow up watching G.I. Joe? Like, I'm not exactly sure age-wise. I think you are younger than I am, but I'm not sure.
Andy Schmidt is
so I wasn't. Pardon?
What? What'd you say, Robert?
I just said Andy is timeless. He has no age.
I grew up like this. This was what, like 84, 85. Like this is my jam. I was like 8 or 9 when this was on.
Yeah, this was September 13th, 1984.
1984, yeah. So I think I just turned 9.
We were talking about when this miniseries started.
Okay, so we're the same age then.
Yeah, I was born in 76.
Okay, I was 73, so I'm just a little bit older.
Right, but I also too, I had 2 older brothers, and so like I was constantly into the things that they were into, and GI Joe and Transformers kind of were like the first things that kind of like became more mine than theirs.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I mean they both liked them, but like I was all in. I was more into Transformers. I've always been a little bit more sci-fi than action. But
well, Andy, it's been really good having you on, man.
I'm excommunicated. Just
I'm
like
kidding.
that.
I'm kidding.
I don't get a fair trial. What's going on?
We'll have the three face
still
judges.
Cool.
So here's the continuation of Spirit versus Storm Shadow, and I just, I got to call this, man. There's no way Spirit would beat Storm Shadow in the hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, well, I think you're underestimating Spirit and Freedom. You can't keep Spirit down, and Freedom runs deep. So I don't think Storm Shadow stands a chance just from an ideological standpoint. I mean, what does that guy believe in? He believes in a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
I love how they just sit there together.
Wow, and that stone just floats.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. Like, how is that buoyant? I don't understand.
Yeah, I was thinking it was a hollow metal case containing something else.
That, by the way, was your Transformers crossover. There were 5 Optimus Primes in
I
that.
know, right? Every time there's a semi truck in this series, it's always a red, flat front semi.
So do you guys have like a favorite version of Roadblock? Because like this is a character that has been very different. Like who's your Roadblock? What version of Roadblock is for you?
Armor Tech from the Star Brigade.
OG Roadblock for me. I mean, that's Roadblock. Anything else is not Roadblock as far as I'm concerned. That guy you saw a second ago, that's Roadblock.
Not even Dwayne? Dwayne doesn't work as Roadblock for you?
No.
I was glad to have him in the movie because it got him some visibility. But yeah, no, honestly, costume style, I think I'd roll with 86 version 2.
Yeah,
I can see that.
I have a dream that Terry Crews would play Roadblock.
Oh yeah.
And as far as the design, for me, the first Roadblock toy I got was version 2 with like the green strap over vest jacket. So for me, that's always I guess I knew that this was Roadblock, but that version 2 is the toy I had, so I always kind of associated that one more. But
Same here.
I always like drawing it because I could exaggerate his proportion compared to all the other figures, the characters.
Speaking of, is the new
I see that because I grew up with. I grew up with the Roger Moore Bond movies, but then as I grew up and understood what Bond was, I knew that Connery was clearly the better Bond. So maybe you guys eventually will outgrow this silly Roadblock thing that you have and come to understand that Tank Top Roadblock is the one true Roadblock.
Okay. He does look like supremely beefcake in the tank top.
That's true.
Yeah, I had this weird situation at IDW where they were contractually obligated to do a G.I. Joe manga series.
Oh, weird.
Which wound up coming out of Flourish, but they didn't really want to do it. So like the budget was like super cheap, and so I was like, well, I'll write it. Like that'll be fun. And so I just decided to do something totally different. But I got to choose my G.I. Joes, and I did this sort of like sci-fi, very bizarre manga series, but Roadblock was like one of the first ones I decided like he's got to be in there, and he's got to be carrying a Gatling gun because that's just awesome. And like there was like he's just one of those characters that like there's just never a question, like he's got to be in.
All right, I've got to ask Andy, was this because it was so close to Sigma 6 and they wanted, because that cartoon seemed kind of Japanese animation inspired, was there some connection there? Can you shed any light? You might have an NDA that still lives.
No. So I mean, it's this really like bizarre thing. So for those of you that don't know, manga in Japanese means comics.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that word means, right? So we at IDW, and I was editing the Star Trek line as well, and the Paramount Pictures sold Star Trek manga rights to a different comics publisher. So they gave us the exclusive comics rights, and then they gave another publisher the exclusive comics rights. And so IDW was pretty upset. And so like it came back to me. I had to have a conversation with Paramount, but it also came back to like, you need to talk to all the licensors. Got a call that week of like, guys, manga means comics. You can't just like, and then what Hasbro did, which threw me for a loop, was go, well, then you need to make a G.I. Joe manga. and Michael, who's like in charge of the licensing publishing stuff, it was awesome. He's to this day, he's one of my best friends. His family comes down and visits me. We just were up there last year visiting them and stuff. It just like threw me for a loop. I was like, wait, what? Are you serious? And he's like, yeah, if you're staking a claim on it, you got to produce it. So we were like, at that point, we were like obligated. And like, we didn't really know what to do. Like that didn't really fit in the line. I mean, we had just like rebooted the thing. So it was not time to do like a zany, wacky take on the thing we were trying to reboot seriously. So I just did this like off to the side, completely separate sort of sci-fi thing. And then it came out and no one cared. But we just decided that the artist and I just decided we were just going to have as much fun as possible. And so those were the longest scripts I wrote, because I was like, the scripts were written like stream of conscious. So like when the one that I remember is that there, I think it's the second issue, the Baroness shows up, and so it's like, it's like splash page, Baroness shows up, she looks awesome and hot, and then like the rest of the page is filled with me just recapping what the Baroness meant to me. But I wish I was here last week to talk about this.
Yeah.
Like meant to me as a child, and the awakenings that it brought on, and all this stuff. And so of course, like, part of the system with Hasbro is you have to like give them everything along the way for them to approve. And I got the approval on this script, and the approval said, "This is the most entertaining script I've ever read.
Wow.
It's too bad it can never see the light of day," because there's like all this other stuff that was like so like R-rated, like in it, that was like, none of that was going to come out like in the actual comic. But like, my whole thing was like, can I just write a script that just makes this a joy for my collaborators to draw and do? And yeah, my artist Keaston was just like, this is the most fun he said he'd ever had, like, drawing a comic. And it's silly, like, I wasn't taking it seriously. I kind of was, in some respects it was more based on the cartoon of just like, it can be silly, it can be whatever, like there's still a threat, there's still action and adventure, but it's just kind of ridiculous. There's a giant cobra in it that's like 50 stories tall that's just wrecking Tokyo. Yeah, who doesn't want to see that?
Oh no, I have to track this down now. I'm dying to read it.
Hold on, I'll show you a copy. Hang on.
There you go.
I want to ask Andy too. And again, I don't know how much you can divulge, but like right during that same time we were talking about Roadblock, we weren't actually even able to call him Roadblock at the time.
Well, that's let me get a little.
What's the
closer.
title of this?
Future Noir.
Future.
Oh, okay.
Future
I remember
Noir.
that. I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah,
I remember that. They had some really great covers on there.
they were pretty fun covers. I like those. Yeah. And the artist is actually Italian. There's not a single Japanese person that worked on this, of course.
Got an American and an Italian making some Japanese manga.
It's definitely grown. I mean, there's a lot of French publishers that are doing lots of manga and without any.
But the artist, I called him Kisan. His name is nigh impronounceable as far as I'm concerned. But Kisan, like, I mean, he is like a legitimately like huge manga fan. He was like, I want to do stuff like that, and I was like, I haven't read those things. So, but actually, I'm really glad I did the project because it turned me on to reading manga, and now one of my favorite books now is Vinland Saga, which is amazing.
Well, so we got a vote of confidence from Kevin Longman. He's got Andy's Comics Experience Writer's Book and says it's an amazing resource. And then Matthew Matson read Future Noir and said that he enjoyed it. So there you go, Andy.
All right.
Votes of confidence.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate that.
So, guys, we got Andy Schmidt on all night, meaning for like the next 20 minutes. So get your questions in for him. We're gonna tune into the cartoon. We got a couple more segments, and we'll stop between segments and ask Andy your questions.
So while we're watching this, Andy, I don't know what insight you might have, but there was a while there where I know we were working on the book, especially just talking about Roadblock. We weren't actually allowed to use the name Roadblock. So
did you use Heavy Duty or somebody else?
Yeah, we were often superimposing Heavy Duty into that role.
Yeah, that was just a trademark issue.
Yeah.
So I heard that they added Roadblock to that big box set Revolution that came out at SDCC with the crossover. It had Micronauts and Visionaries and several other properties. ROM was included as a 3 3/4 figure. But I heard they threw Roadblock in there to renew that trademark. Maybe that alleviates.
That box is empty.
What box is empty?
They just showed the underside of it. It is empty. Like,
oh,
if you scroll back a few seconds.
Well, that's why it was floating.
You can't go back.
It still doesn't
We're
make sense.
recreating watching this as children. You can't go back.
There is no
Hey, that's right.
rewind.
There's no pause and rewind.
That's funny.
There's
So
Fireflies.
how many of these-
So we know somebody's in trouble because he never loses, apparently.
That's right.
He does his job. He's a consummate professional. Maybe he's going to beat up Spirit where Storm Shadow failed.
See, now it's solid again. That's weird.
Freedom is going to catch Firefly's grenade
Oh.
in his beak and eat
Firefly finally failed to Freedom.
What was that? That beeping noise. It was like the sound effect of somebody getting kicked in the face.
That's the sound effect of someone wanting to know what's happening with the G.I. Joe series that Hama was putting together with Belomo, the hardcovers. They keep asking about it. I've got them on my shelf too.
I don't have any insight into that.
Yeah.
So, Andy, when you were a kid and you were playing with G.I. Joe, was there a point where you were like, "That's it, I'm out. I can't go along with this anymore"? I've gone on the record as saying that like Battle Force 2000 was kind of my red line, and that's where I stopped. Like, what was it for you that made you finally go, "I'm out"?
I don't know that I ever really had a moment like that. I mean, I think I just kind of either got interested in kind of other things. Like I remember watching the movie and realizing it was different than I was used to. But I actually, and even now, I still like that movie. Like yes, it's totally bizarre to like do that 180 on who your villains are and do the weird mutant thing, but it wasn't like a deal breaker for me. So but I did not follow it after that. But it was not a like, oh, I'm disgusted. Like I just didn't follow it. I still read the comics for years.
Yeah.
I read the comics well after issue 100. I don't think I made it all the way to the end, but like,
gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I switched to just following it in comics and that was it. And I don't, at some point in there, I kind of stopped buying new toys, probably when my dad's job changed and we didn't have very much money. So
gotcha.
We just stopped buying everything except bread. But yeah, there was no point where like I'm out. I do remember in the comics, I think it was the cover of issue 50. I could be wrong though, where Destro instead of being silver is gold, and like I couldn't handle that.
Yeah,
I did not. I like legit. Like I was like, I don't like it. I'm like Destro and I are done.
That was a really hard change to swallow as a kid for me too. I just didn't see it like. It's not a stylistic decision to go from silver to gold. Like he's just blinged out now.
Right. Yeah. No. It's like he was no longer classy. I don't know what it was. Right. I don't know. It just did not. Well, did not fly.
He had his own kind of faction. Wasn't it like Iron Grenadiers?
That's right. That's right.
Like that?
Gold-headed Destro came with the Spoiler, which also came with the Demon, which also came with it was Destro's like advent of his whole army. Yeah. So you eventually got the AGP. There's multiple Iron Grenadier vehicles and characters.
So there was just like weird trivia. There were I was developing now I'm blanking on their name. The Russian group, the Red
October Guard.
The October Guard. Thank you. Yeah, we were developing an October Guard series for a while, and we just couldn't quite get it.
What?
Like
I would have loved that.
No, it was really good.
Because I wanted to see the wider team for the October Guard.
Well, it was really cool because it was like 2008, 2009 when we were relaunching, and I was really enjoying working with Mike and Chris on the writing team on Cobra, and so we were talking about doing October Guard, but I was like, well, you can't do October Guard the same way. Like this is a post Cold War era.
Yeah.
So the whole concept was like the October Guard had like fallen into disarray, and so like what were they up to? Were they still a group? And like so we started getting into all that sort of stuff, and it was really cool. There were a lot of like really awesome ideas, but it never quite happened. And then the other series that and I got the first issue script written, approved, and paid for, but then I forget what happened, but there was some reason why the series never actually came out. But we were Mike Costa was writing, who's from Detroit, was writing a Stalker solo miniseries about Stalker in Detroit and all kinds of stuff. And that one was really cool too, because it also was going to introduce my favorite Joe, Lowlight. And then it never happened, and like I don't think I ever introduced Lowlight. Like he was just like saved for this thing, and then I never. But I love that character.
That hurts to hear it, man, because literally,
Yeah.
like anything Gage or Costa wrote after Cobra, I would have absolutely given it a try. And I think there's a lot of Joe fans that want to know more about October Guard, like beyond the little nucleus team that we always got exposure
Right.
to. Like if they're
Man,
comparable to GI Joe, they must be a much larger unit.
Yeah,
I
they're-
would have driven you crazy with emails and phone calls begging to do October Guard covers. I might still I might email you tonight just to bother you about October Guard covers.
Just to see.
Old time thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the October Guard series I think would have been super cool. We did not develop it fully, but like the one of the ideas was that the Soviet Union had fallen apart, and there were all these people trying to get nuclear weapons and that sort of stuff, and so one of the ideas was that the October Guard was actually trying to go around and like prevent those from falling into the wrong hands and that sort of stuff, and that's how they were going to meet up with GI Joe, was they were going to wind up on two sides of that coin, but they weren't going to be necessarily bad. They were soldiers. Sometimes they'd be on the side of the angels, and sometimes not. As happens with soldiers.
Yeah.
But I think it was going to be. I think had we been able to continue to develop it, I think it could have been something really unique and cool. For me, I like to have comics that are fun and that are cool, but that like have something to them, like something to chew on.
I think that was one of the cool things about how Larry wrote October Guard early on, was they weren't really written as the bad guys.
Right.
They were fully formed and they had their own agenda, which wasn't necessarily evil. It was just not the pro-American agenda.
Right.
And I think as a kid, you're just kind of fed all of this negative information about the Russians, and then you get this comic book that challenges a lot of what you've been hearing from kind of the more jingoistic side of who the enemy was.
Yeah, that was one of the things that Larry, I think, did really well. There are a lot of things that Larry did really well, but he just didn't take a cookie cutter approach to this stuff. And honestly, on the Transformers side, it was that on the comics for years until Simon Furman took over, who had been writing Transformers in the UK, but when he took over the American series, like these characters now had personalities, and they were individuals, and they were much more human. And that's when that, as a comic, that's when that picked up. As a cartoon, they'd kind of done that all along. But one of the coolest things was editing G.I. Joe was getting to work with Larry. I'm sure I've told Robert a bunch of stories about working with Larry, and like one of my favorite things that I learned pretty quickly was there were certain things you just didn't argue with Larry about because you knew he was not only going to A, win, so what the point, but B, like he was gonna beat you over the head with like an actual war story that proved his point. And you were not only going to lose, but you were going to feel as though you had like just spat on a soldier and he was whipping your ass. So yeah, there were things I just don't argue with Larry on certain things.
So Tom, the concept of an evil empire was appropriated from Star Wars by Ronald Reagan, who used it in his 1983 Evil Empire speech to describe the Soviet Union, dramatically raising the stakes in the arms race between it and the United States.
What was it with Reagan and Star Wars? Didn't he start the Star Wars program? Wasn't that him too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good movie and all, but I mean, I don't know that I want to base my system of government off of it.
Right. Well, now we have Space Force.
We do.
There's a Steve Carell movie that's coming out called Space Force, I believe. Should be fun.
Before we get back into the show, I think my biggest question for you, Andy, is who is your favorite artist, Tom Feaster or Robert Atkins?
Don't let him bait you.
So Philip Donnelly noticed something that I actually noticed during that last segment. I'm not going to let him answer it. I know he doesn't want to.
I was going to go Antonio Fuso, the artist on Cobra. But whatever.
I think we both agree.
I don't know if you noticed, but I have a thing for Italians. Apparently, Italian male artists. It's my go-to.
Did you guys notice the rack focus to Flint in that last segment?
I did not catch it, honestly. I'm sure they probably started off with a larger drawing and zoomed in on it.
Yeah, to do rack focus and animation, they would have two plates, and they'd actually literally do a rack focus.
It would be in camera.
It'd be in camera, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a guess. It's a guess. I do not know.
The only thing I was focused on was Baroness's weird helmet when she was.
I
flying.
know. What was she wearing
Yeah.
there? All right,
This
we
is
gotta
like-
actually
I've never seen-
comment on the cartoon this go around, okay, guys?
All right.
But I have to say, like, this is where some of the series designs. I wish that they had gotten, and I don't know how they would have been able to do this, but I wish that Ron Rudat had been more involved in the designs of the show stuff.
Sure.
There was a big discrepancy between the look and the style of the vehicles and the uniforms that were created for the toys, which were based on, a more realistic worldview and yes,
Research.
there's some sci-fi elements to Cobra, but like the giant snake-headed plane, there's nothing about that's aerodynamic. Nothing.
Yeah.
And so, and I think there's ways of doing a snake-shaped or a cobra-headed shaped plane, but that's where I wish there had been a little bit more of a mind meeting of the minds with design between Hasbro and the designers of the show.
So that actually leads into our guest next week, who was the Hasbro brand manager at the time, and he can speak to what was that collaboration like between Hasbro and Sunbow and Marvel Studios. Because absolutely, Sunbow had to fill in a lot of the blanks, especially early on when there was only a very limited number of vehicles released. They had to fill in the blanks and come up with their own stuff. And you're absolutely right. The elegance of the vehicle design for the cartoon does not oftentimes hit that kind of high watermark hit by Wayne Luther and the other early vehicle designers for the line. So yeah, you're right. Good point, Tom. And to Robert Atkins's point, what the heck was on Baroness's headdress? Like, where did that come from? They had model sheets. They chose to diverge from them.
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
My guess would be that at the last minute they realized they had to put a helmet on her.
Yeah.
For like being up to code reasons, and they're like, somebody quick, grab the worst looking helmet you can.
So, hey, Deanna Davis, I am not trash talking Russ Heath, who did an amazing job drawing the model sheets and everything. But did Russ Heath also design the vehicles for the cartoon? We've got some pretty knowledgeable cartoon folks that join us each week, and so I want to make sure to try to tap into them.
Yeah.
If we can actually make this show educational, that would be awesome.
We'll do it through them, not through
Yeah,
us.
we say that every week.
Follow the chat for education.
Exactly.
Right.
Listen,
Exactly.
I'm willing to put myself out on the ledge of saying something stupid if it means helping others to learn.
Please do. Help yourself. Keep it up.
That's how he lives his life, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right,
Listen.
let's jump back into the episode so we can.
Okay.
I'll make one comment on the episode. I'm ready.
There you go.
I think I peaked with my freedom catching the throwing star.
Which was great.
Yeah, we've always talked about just these little breaks. You'd hear that, and you'd have to come running in from the kitchen and make sure.
Oh, yeah.
Once the episode started again.
Was I the
It's
only
the
one with a
second-
VHS player that was like trying to record every episode and put them in order and make chronological sense out of them? And
VHS
Like
player,
continuity.
what were you living in the future?
were you on a
you-
Betamax at that time? What you have?
You in your mansion with a VHS player? Your time machine? No, I didn't. I don't think I even saw a VHS player until, I don't know, I would say like 86, 87 in that area maybe.
All
Like
right.
I was pretty old before I even saw a VHS player. So the idea of recording these, it didn't even enter our mind. Like it just wasn't even a concept. I've told the other guys before about we would run, and I mean run home or ride our bikes as fast as we possibly could, just on the off chance we might miss a minute of the show. And we had a full hour once we got home before the show even started. But there was just this terror that we were going to miss something.
I love
'Cause
that
you were
they
never gonna
lined
see it
the
again.
hall of this with like Cobra baskets that you can
I
hide
know
in.
exactly. She just pops out of.
Those aren't statues.
Roadblock just manhandled Cobra Commander so much. He's like, puts him in a headlock. He's just holding him above his head. It cracked me up.
I don't know if I'm in the
trash receptacles.
I don't know if I'm in the majority or the minority on Cobra Commander versus the cloth mask versus the silver mask. Where do we fall on that?
I prefer the look of the metal mask, but I hate drawing it. I prefer drawing the cloth.
Okay.
I'm pro battle helmet.
Yeah.
Actually, I prefer the cloth. I mean, to me, the cloth makes him look more evil. It's got that kind of I mean, let's be honest, that clan kind of tie-in, the cloth mask is just some evil stuff.
Terrible toy though. The cloth mask.
You didn't like it? What did you not like about it?
Wasn't it like a helmet? Like it just like.
You could peel it off. You wouldn't like what was underneath, but it's kind of like Serpentor. I don't know.
If I had a dime for every time I heard that.
Yeah. I actually made the accident of not the accident. It was just a terrible decision to crack open Serpentor's mask and pull it off. And there's this like decrepit, like wretched, shriveled up face inside it. It's pretty interesting. They had to shrink the head sculpt basically to make the helmet.
So I just got reminded of something that I forgot. Like one of the first lessons I learned from G.I. Joe fandom when I was editing the comics, and I've got family that's been in the military. My brother was in the Army and everything. But I love the like not even Tron influence of this. This is amazing. But the American flag patches on the arms. It's just one of those things I just never noticed or never heard anybody say that the blue is always facing forward, no matter which arm it's on. And I just didn't know that. And I think it was Robert. I think it was actually on your cover for G.I. Joe #1. It had gone out as a promo piece, and the flag was not like that. And G.I. Joe fandom hopped on and emailed IDW, and I read it, and I was like, I'll be darned, I did not realize that. And then we changed it, and that was like, and I don't think it ever was wrong again. But there were a bunch of guys that were, military guys or ex-military guys that were Joe fans, and they wound up kind of becoming a little bit of a brain trust. That is awesome.
There's that helmet again.
That helmet is awesome. But yeah, I mean, they were super helpful. They invited me down to the military base. I never actually got to go, but
nice.
Yeah, they were super great. The folks I ran into in the G.I. Joe fandom were fantastic and very supportive of what we were doing. Even when they didn't like it, they still managed to be supportive while expressing their displeasure.
I want to absolutely echo that 100% because I was never in the military, and it was always just based on kind of reference what I could find. And there's a number of Joe fans. Phil Koff is a big,
Phil was one of the guys. Yeah,
a number of guys who would reach out and let me know if I had done something wrong, and it was never mean spirited. It was like, hey, just so you know, your berets look like potato sacks. And I'm like, what? And then they would show me exactly where it would sit and how crisp it would be in certain areas. And I never do it wrong again after that because I learned. I was able to learn from that instruction. And, I remember one issue I drew an MP5 as this enormous gun just because I didn't know. And somebody was like, that's ridiculous. This is the proportions and the size. And again, I made a point to not draw it wrong again. I wanted to learn as much as I could. But I love that about the Joe fan base. They're so willing to help you do that. Yeah.
To be fair, Robert, the weapons were often totally disproportionate in the toy line as well.
Well, I can't remember who said it to me, but at one point somebody pointed out that the weapons that we're drawing, when it's a realistic thing, that's a weapon that at some point someone has had to rely on that to save their own life. Right?
Yeah.
And there's a level of respect for the guys who are using it every day and relying on it to keep them and people around them safe. They forgot to color in Major Blood's eye patch there.
Oh, wow.
Weird.
One of my first jobs in animation was watching for mistakes and line jiggles and things like that. So now it's weird. It kind of takes you out of the fun of watching cartoons. She's like, yeah, that's not right. That's not right.
Yeah, they cut the Doc's arm on a close-up earlier, and it was a more Caucasian skin. I was like, come on, guys.
You're better than that.
Right. This should be the teaser.
I tried really hard to try to get the weapons right as much as possible.
Yep. Well, I mean, to your point, Andy, there is a lot of military folks, a lot of folks that went in the military because of their love for G.I. Joe. I've heard that.
G.I. Joe, or that was the only comic they would read, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I heard that a lot.
Oh, I remember that scene. That freaked me out as a kid. The giant fireball blast thing. Oh, Frank Welker.
Yep.
And Chris Latta. There have been some good guys to do. There's Bruce Timm. Look at that.
Yes.
There have been some good guys who have done some good Cobra Commander voices, but you just can't beat that
Yeah, Chris Latta. For sure. It's just like the Baroness. You can't replace her on voice.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah, she gave us some Baroness last week.
So I have to ask, have you guys caught the new Chris Hemsworth movie on Netflix?
Yeah, I did. Extraction.
Yeah, I finally got to watch it, and I swear, watching every minute of it, all I could think was, I'm watching a rock and roll movie. Like,
oh yeah.
This could easily be a G.I. Joe story.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, obviously,
I've heard good things.
Elements that are the just from an action sequence or an action standpoint, and it's really well executed. I mean, obviously, it's the Russo brothers, but we talked a couple episodes ago about like how to execute a G.I. Joe film in a current world, and I still come back to something along the lines of what Origins was, which was single stories, maybe win a cameo or two from somebody else, and then maybe you build up to an Avengers type thing. But you get these short introductions to individual characters on missions. And like I said, I kept watching that movie going, I'm watching, a rock and roll adventure here.
Yeah, I think a G.I. Joe live action television series could be really, really intriguing, because you could do a lot more. Because the thing that's hard to do in the movie for G.I. Joe is actually get those characters to really come across. Both of those live action films, they struggle with getting you to really pay attention and get to know those characters before they start blowing everything up. And that's motion pictures in general. In TV shows, it's much more character driven. You can still have cool action, but it's much more character driven. And one of the things that I don't think those films communicate is for fans like us, is our love of those characters. Like, I don't watch kind of, we were talking about Roadblock. Like, yeah, I thought Dwayne Johnson was fine. He was great as not Roadblock. You know what I mean? Like that's not Roadblock, but he has a very distinctive personality, at least, to us, and so that's sort of a struggle for the fans. And then if you don't go in as a fan, you don't what do you got to hold on to there? It was interesting because I was around when they were originally talking about what the third G.I. Joe would be, and I was able to talk with some screenwriters who were pitching on it and stuff like that. And so which ultimately leads to like, well, what do you think we should pitch? Like, how do you see the franchise? And those are really fascinating conversations to have with people, because some of them were Joe fans, some of them weren't, and just to talk about that. And one of the things that was interesting at that point, you've got actors that are involved, and I really don't. I'm blanking on the actor's name now, but the guy that played Storm Shadow, I think, has a really good presence and is really compelling. And one of the things that I was advocating for was making him the center of a third G.I. Joe film. Like whether it's that Snake Eyes dies and he winds up coming over and taking up the mantle as Snake Eyes or whatever. I just thought, like, you've got an actor there who I felt had a really good screen presence and was really compelling. It was one of the more compelling screen presences. And sometimes you just got to go with what's working.
Yep.
And kind of go with that. And that was, one thing that we talked about. Obviously it didn't happen, but and we talked about a lot of that sort of stuff. I remember reading the Retaliation script before the movie came out, and I got to give notes on that, and there were some changes made after notes were given and stuff. It was interesting. It was interesting. I did not work on G.I. Joe consistently when I was at Hasbro, but I was in the intellectual property sort of department. And so I get called in from time to time to come and talk on and review certain things. And yeah, it was an interesting time to be at Hasbro working on G.I. Joe, because the sales had declined. And there's this interesting fact, I guess, or whatever, but like when the United States is in the theater of war, G.I. Joe sales slump. And we've been at war in the theater of war for 20 years, right? So yeah. And G.I. Joe is just, toy sales wise slumped. And when it's peacetime, everybody wants to play soldier. But when soldiers are out there risking their lives every day and all that, I'm not sure exactly what it is from a psychological standpoint, but I know, like, for me, like, when Desert Storm opened up and my brother was in the Army, I didn't really want to play Army. That felt too real. And not that it felt disrespectful or anything, but just like, That's my brother out there, you know. My brother, just to be clear, my brother did not go to Desert Storm, but he was in the Army at that time.
When you actually know somebody who is in harm's way, it's harder to escape into the play aspect of, you know,
Right.
good guys and bad guys. It becomes a lot more complicated. And like I said, I don't know how you do a G.I. Joe as America's fighting force the way things are right now. You know, everything is so divided, and politically, I don't know how you even begin to tell that G.I. Joe story the way things are today.
There are a couple approaches that I might want to explore. One of them was, there was a point where we were asked to redevelop G.I. Joe kind of from the ground up.
Is this at Hasbro or IDW?
This is at Hasbro. And what could G.I. Joe be that wasn't military action, because it was really hard to sell that. So like, what can you get that's still G.I. Joe? And so, you know, I kind of did this analysis, and it was like, well, you know, our most popular character is Snake Eyes, obviously, as drawn by Robert and Tom, as everyone knows that's the best version of Snake Eyes.
Yeah, maybe on more often. I'm liking this.
So, you know, I kind of went back to that core sort of, you know, back of the box card that was, you know, he's the ninja commando or commando ninja, whatever it was, and decided to flip that around and make it, you know, the emphasis more on sort of the ninja and more on the Arashikage and more on these sort of like fantasy elements of it. And so we developed this stuff. We had all this cool art done. And the idea was to make it more like that what made him unique was not that he was a ninja amongst a group of commandos, but that he was actually a commando amongst a group of ninjas fighting this sort of ninja fantasy battle. And so we just sort of flipped that dynamic and flipped like who he was with. Storm Shadow was a major player in it, and other familiar characters would be in it as well, but it got more into like this Arashikage sort of mythology, and it got fantasy. There were like magical elements and stuff like that, and maybe it went too far, but I remember being in a meeting with like Brian Goldner and all those guys with chief whatever titles, and like pitching this. I'm like, this could go over like a lead balloon, and then they loved it, and then nothing happened. It was great. But it may have been like, I mean, I'm not sitting here saying like this was going to be some great thing. Like it may have been it could have been the total bomb. And I remember being asked that, like, do you think G.I. Joe fans will love this? And I was like, no, I don't. But it might find new fans, which could be good, you know.
Right.
And you know, if we can find a way to kind of bridge that gap as we go. You know, but at that point, you know, certainly the feeling was we needed to make some sort of statement. Like you need to do something different, because what we're doing right now, sales was declining, and then they actually discontinued the line for a little bit there, at least.
Well, Retaliation. So as a toy collector, I can speak pretty succinctly to that. Retaliation killed the toy line. It came out at Walmart, Target, the major big box stores, and then the movie got delayed a year. And none of the big box stores took it back after that. The only place that would buy it was Toys R Us after that. So the toy line.
I forgot about that, but yeah, you're right. That definitely hurt.
Yeah, it was kind of the death knell. Like you could tell sales had already declined a bit, but then that was it. Okay, so Andy, I had a question. Obviously, sure. I've already spoken my love for the Cobra series by Gage and Costa. And I know when Mark Weber was a brand manager there for a little bit, he had a equal passion for that series as I did. And we talked about, you know, just kind of dreaming over if somebody like Netflix would create a serial series with something like based off of a book like Cobra. The Last Laugh, the hardcover you guys made, you must have been happy with it too, because you made a hardcover out of it.
Yeah.
Was it ever discussed to create some serial content as opposed to just doing these, to your point, long form action films that you can't fall in love with the characters?
Nothing that I recall like being taken real seriously. Like I think there were things like this where, like, you know, somebody would be like, you know what, we should really consider a longer form fiction thing for this. We certainly talked about a novel line, for example. In fact, when I was at IDW, I edited a collection of short prose stories. Max Brooks actually kind of curated that.
Tales from the Cobra Wars. It's on my bedside table, man.
Yeah.
You got the story with Skid in there. If you can make me respect Skid, Mark, I can respect you. Okay.
Yeah, that was Dwayne's story, wasn't it?
I think so. One. Is that Dwayne Straczynski?
Straczynski, yeah.
He wrote Bloodshot when it rebooted for Valiant, I believe.
Yeah,
he's an awesome writer.
Yeah, so. he's really great. I really enjoy him quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, there would be a lot of discussions. The thing is and this is not unique to Hasbro, so this isn't me like bagging on them at all. But but any major corporation like that, like it takes 100 people to say yes for something to work. It only takes one to say no for it not to happen. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do something that departs from tradition or departs from what something is, it's really, really difficult to move the needle on that, because eventually you're going to, whether it's, a brand manager or it's one of the toy designers, or it could be, and you don't know where it's going to come from. There's going to be somebody that's going to come in and be like, that doesn't look like G.I. Joe to me. Or that's not the way I see it. And I don't want to design that. That looks dumb or whatever. Usually they're not that jerky about it, but there's somebody there. And sometimes, you don't know where it's coming from. Like they don't tell you, they just undercut you in a meeting you're not even in. And so you don't know what happens. And so, and that, more or less, I assume that's what happened with the story I was just telling, where like Brian Goldner and the chief marketing officer, John Frascati, were really super excited about this take on it. But what we realized later is that we didn't develop it with the G.I. Joe brand team. And so what I think happened was they were like, we didn't develop this, we're doing our own thing. Like, no, we're not doing that. And not like in a mean-spirited way, but like they were doing their own thing. And that was my oversight of not inviting them in and kind of figuring that in. But that's you get into any company and you got to learn that. Yeah, learn how to play all those angles, and that in some cases that's the hardest part of your job.
Yeah, I went to work for a big university for 3 years and never got over the politics of the place, man. It's crazy when you have an institution like that that's thousands of people. Everybody's got their own little kingdom to protect. They're all trying to grow their own little fiefdom at the expense of everybody else's. It's
right.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and like everybody wanted G.I. Joe to be doing better than it was, but it was very difficult to find any kind of consensus on how to do that. I got to work on some other like really cool properties that again kind of went nowhere. Like I got to work on Micronauts, I got to work on Visionaries, and was redeveloping those like from scratch, which is really one of the things that I enjoy the most. I mean, that's why like rebooting G.I. Joe was like, okay, I'll take the job because I get to reboot G.I. Joe, which means I get to go in, I get to dig into it, figure out what makes it work, figures out what makes those characters tick, and then represent them for today's audience. Like that's the type of thing that really gets me really excited to do. And so yeah, I got to do that with G.I. Joe with great creators. I mean, I never try and take credit for the whole thing, obviously, but it's really difficult to get a major corporation on board. We were able to do it in comics because we didn't have to have 100 people approve it. There were like 3 people, that were really looking at the comics. One of the biggest compliments I got, because the people having this discussion in front of me that were high up at Hasbro didn't know I was involved in the comics, was the movie guys were like, yeah, we really like the IDW comics. And so with Retaliation, they were trying to move it closer to what the comics were like.
Nice.
It's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, how many of those do you read? Nice. And then, so they started talking about the ones that they read. And I was like, yeah, I read those too. Those are good. except for Tom Feaster, the guy sucks.
Andy, at the end of your tenure at Hasbro, you were still there when the Revolution stuff was coming out, right? Where they were merging the universe.
No, I actually left in 2011. So I basically set up Civil War, and I feel bad about this because I left like in the middle of Civil War.
Yeah.
And then John Barber came on board and had this giant crossover. Not that it was a mess because it was bad or anybody was doing a bad job, but you're just like thrust in the middle of this thing and whatever. And I think the biggest mistake in that Civil War thing, which is 2 characters are in 2 different places on opposite sides of the globe at the same time. I think that mistake was actually something I didn't catch, not something that John missed. But yeah, I mean, he got kind of thrown in, but I think that kind of, Civil War, I think probably, could have been tighter than it was if there'd been, one editor all the way through it. But yeah, I left there, but doing the whole plan and killing Cobra Commander and then doing the hunt for the Joes and, making the new Cobra Commander, all of that kind of came in under me, and that plan was set. And we had some really cool stuff set up for the new Cobra Commander for Crake. And then I ditched everybody. I left to take that corporate job. And then I left that like less than 3 years later. And I was like, I'm out. I'm going to go freelance because I don't like working for people.
I feel you.
So we're going to go ahead and probably wrap up for tonight. Andy, we want to thank you so much for your time. It's been so much fun the last few weeks getting together like this and to kind of have something for the fan base all to kind of watch and enjoy the cartoon together. But we love having the opportunity to talk to other creative professionals, people who have had a hand in the property. So thank you so much for your time and friendship over the years. It's been great to have you on the show.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Carson, it's great to meet you. Tom and Robert, always great to see you guys. And
it's been too long.
It has been.
Nice to meet you too, Andy.
And, I don't think any other shows made me realize how boring my background is compared to all of your guys' stuff. Like, good grief, man. I can't wait to get my studio together, but no excuse.
I feel like, Robert, you keep moving around each episode, though. Like last week you were in bed.
Yeah, that's true. I was.
I feel it's very late.
I feel like Robert's at a Best Western or something. Like if he pans to the right, or
like beach painting or something behind me.
Real quick before we go, guys. I like to give credit where credit's due. This episode was still written by Dan Thompson, or directed by Dan Thompson, and written by Ron Friedman. And we got some feedback from Deanna Davis that the other character designers. So Carol Lundberg did models, and Jim Fletcher, Lego, and Gary Montalabo did backgrounds, and that's from Larry Houston, who was the storyboard artist, who was on episode 4 with us. So we got some information that's usable in here tonight.
There's some education, thanks to people who aren't the 4 of us.
Right. Thanks, Diana. Please join us next week so we can educate.
Tom, do you have something real quick?
We need to get Diana on at some point so she can just spend the entire episode telling us what we've said that was wrong.
Yeah. She would be the Scarlet, like the intelligence of the bunch, just making all of us look like idiots.
It would just be like a series of eye rolls, and by the end of it, just like, oh my God, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Brandon, we miss you.
That's true. Yeah. So hopefully we'll see Brandon next week. Okay.
Thanks for joining us, Andy.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys, we will be back again 8:30 Eastern again next week for
Thank you very much.
Episode 5, right? This is the grand finale of the miniseries, and we'll be wrapping it up. Well, I've already spoiled it. It's the brand manager. For those of you who don't know who he is, he's Kirk Bazigian. Do your homework. Go to 3djoes.com and look at the Kirk Bazigian page. There's hours of audio interviews. So you guys bring your questions next week, and it should be a good one. All right. Talk to y'all later. Yo, Joe.
He never gives up. He'll stay till the right one. G.I. Joe.